So, what about Alexander Pushkin? Pushkin is Russia's greatest poet, 1/8 black African and very proud of it, a precocious teenage poet, a rebel under police surveillance since the age of 19, exiled to the south of Russia for seditious poems, put under house arrest, but who also wanted to serve the Tsar as Russia's national poet. There he is in the middle with his disturbingly beautiful wife. Pushkin created masterpieces in every literary genre and set the standard, like Shakespeare does in English, Goethe in German, Dante in Italian. Here we have Pushkin reciting poetry at the age of 14. What he had was a romantic imagination, but with a neoclassical discipline training it. Efficient, compact, never used too many words. His dramas can be set almost like libretti. There's an unsubstantiated legend that Pushkin once said, "I wrote Rusalka as a libretto for an opera." There are thousands of musical works that exist of Pushkin's words, including 150 operas, all of Pushkin's own dramas. He finished 6 of them, didn't become operas, as I mentioned earlier. But there is something almost operatic about Pushkin's life, exotic, mythic, sacrificial, passionately romantic. His final poisoned years, especially awful, 1935-36, he fell in love with and married the most beautiful woman in Russia in 1831. The Pushkins had 4 children in 6 years, but this did not prevent her from being courted by the Tsar himself, and also desperately stalked by an officer in the Russian service named Georg Dantes. In 1834, having finished Eugene Onegin, Pushkin wrote most of his play Rusalka. His popularity was fading on the Russian market. Pushkin was superstitious, he was terrified of losing his mind, began to write poems about madness. In 1837, depressed and deeply in debt, Pushkin challenged Dantes to a duel to defend his wife's honor, and he was killed on the first shot at the age of 38. Now, why does this matter to Russian music and to the mermaid plot? There is, in this plot, a good deal of madness. That's the Mad Miller, who actually not only goes mad, but has the prince who watches him go mad worry about going mad himself. There's jealousy, there's duels of honor in various trimmed ways, and the cult of the martyred poet. Pushkin himself rapidly became a cult, a myth. The themes that occupied him in his final year, there were romantic, thoroughly romantic ones, madness, jealousy, the purity of a woman, as I mentioned earlier, but other themes were actually more bourgeois and prosaic. The responsibility of a poet to provide, to be paid for his work, to support his family, which Pushkin felt he increasingly could not. The constant presence of a surveillance state, which was Nicholas I and post-Napoleonic Russia, censorship of private and public writings, a punitive authority figure always ready to crush what you hold dearest, especially when in league with the seducer of your wife. The reason this matters is because in Pushkin's writings of the early 1830s, he turns this anxiety, this powerful authority figure, into art via the female, not the male. And that's why I linked Rusalka, the all-powerful mermaid, with Eugene Onegin, the all-powerful Tatyana figure. So just consider those 2 plots. Most people know something about Eugene Onegin. You're going to know something about Rusalka. Tatyana Larina, that's being rejected by Onegin, and then a sketch of the miller's daughter by the mill. The man is foolish and selfish, and by the end he's changed radically, going mad with love and grief. He's shocked into a new understanding of his life. The woman throughout is trusting and naive, and she stays the same till the end of the story. She survives calmly, sternly in her own sphere. She does not lose her mind. She comes into her own mind. She has the last word. She goes on loving the man she began to love, but always on her own terms. Right away we think of the high society plot of Eugene Onegin. both the Tchaikovsky opera and Pushkin's novel in verse. Tatyana falls in love with Onegin. He turns her down. When it's too late, he's drawn mysteriously back to her. He falls in love with her. But she not only turns him down, but she lectures him rather severely about courting her, and then leaves him. His wife's burnt out. He's totally sterile. End of opera. That's also the fairy tale plot of Rusalka, but of course with fairy tale additions, which in addition to being peasant folklore has a more graphic and explicit carnal side than Onegin, the romantic girl who is spurned, is not just spurned but impregnated, betrayed, and abandoned. She drowns herself, but she doesn't die, just as Tatyana doesn't die. Now, Pushkin loved the water. To drown yourself in Russian folklore has a particular significance, but Pushkin always wanted to use the sea not for drowning but for escaping. He was fascinated by big bodies of water. He was never allowed out of the landlocked Russian Empire. So what we have is a strange and interesting understanding of how water functions in a continental